Lahat tayo'y may pagkakaiba-iba. Hatya'y kamangha-mangha. Ilan dito'y madaling makita. Gaano kakatangkad, estilo ng buhok, kulay ng mata at iba pa. Ilan dito'y hindi agad makikita. Paboritong pagkain. Saan tayo takot? Espesyal na talento. At ang nakakatuwa, iba-iba rin ang pagtingin natin sa mundo. Halimbawa, anong nakikita mo sa drawing na ito? Ang tingin ng karamihan ay pato, pero maaring ang tingin ng iba ay kuneho. Ano man ang iyong nakita, ikaw ay tama! Ito'y isa lamang trick drawing para ipakita na ang mga utak ay iba-ibang gumana. Ang utak ay ang computer ng iyong katawan at iba-iba rin ang paggana nito sa bawat tao. Ito ang nagkokontrol kung paano tayo natututo, kaya tayo ay may iba't ibang kagalingan. Kung paano tayo nakakaramdam, kaya't iba't iba ang ating nararamdamang mga emosyon. At kung paano tayo nakikipag-usap at nakikipag-ugnayan. Minsan may mga utak na iba ang paraan ng paggana na naapektuhan ang mga pandama at apektado nito ang pakikipag-ugnayan sa iba. Ang tawag dito ay autism. Maraming tao ang may autism at maaaring may kakilala kang may autism. At dahil dito, mahalaga na maintindihan natin kung ano ang autism. Ang espesyal na utak ng may autism ay nagiging dahilan para minsan ay maging magaling sila sa mga bagay na kung saan tayo nahihirapan, tulad ng mathematics, drawing o music. Pwede rin kabaligtaran ang mangyari. At ang madali para sa atin ay napakahirap naman para sa kanila, tulad ng pakikipagkaibigan. Ang iyong mga pandama ay laging nakikipag-usap sa iyong utak tungkol sa iyong kapaligiran at tungkol sa ibang tao. Ngunit kapag ang utak at ang mga pandama ng isang tao ay nahirapang mag-usap, ang utak ay maaaring maguluhan at malito, at ito'y nakakaapekto sa pagtingin sa mundo. Ilarawan mo sa isip nung ikaw ay naglalakad sa kalye. Ganito ang posibleng maramdaman ng isang taong may autism sa parehong sitwasyon. Nakakatakot, di ba? Ang malungkot dito kadalasan ay hindi masabi ng tao na may autism ang kanyang pakiramdam. Kaya minsan kahit sila'y naguguluhan, sa panlabas ay mukha naman silang okay, ngunit hindi makahingi ng tulong. Lahat tayo ay may ginagawa para kumalma kapag kinakabahan. Maaaring umiwas ng tingin, yakapin ang sarili, kagatin ng kuko, maglikot, kagatin ng labi at iba pa. At tulad natin, ang mga may autism ay may sariling paraan para kumalma sa mga ganitong pagkakataon. Ang mga bagay na ito ay maaaring kakaiba, ngunit paraan lang nila ito para maging kalmado. Pag ganito sila, ibig sabihin sila'y nahihirapan. At para makatulong, mainam na hindi natin gawin ang mga sumusunod. Magalit, hindi sila pansinin, o kaya'y lokohin sila. Tandaan, hindi dahil ang CD ng Xbox ay hindi mabasa ng PlayStation, ibig sabihin ay sira na ito. Ang mga may autism ay nangangailangan ng mga kaibigan na handang magbigay ng panahon na kilalanin sila. Pakikipag-usap at pangunawa, ito ang makakabuti para sa lahat. Ang mga may autism ay walang sakit o depekto. Iba lamang ang kanilang pagtingin sa mundo. At sa pamamagitan ng tulong ng mga kaibigan, maaari din nilang ibahagi sa atin kung paano nila nakikita ang mundo. Ang autism ay maaaring maging daan sa mga kamangha-manghang bagay.
So let us play the message from Executive Director Emer Rojas.
Pinagbalang umaga sa inyong lahat. The National Council on Disability Affairs conveys our warm greetings to everyone, especially the persons on the autism spectrum, including their families, to the celebration of the 26th Philippine National Autism Consciousness Week, being held annually every third week of January. Our annual observance is based on Proclamation number 711 of 1996, issued by then the President Fidel D. Ramos. It highlighted the need to promote awareness on autism and to establish a supportive environment that will enable persons in the spectrum to live with dignity and become productive members of our society. Autism spectrum disorder is one of the hidden disabilities which make this celebration very important in increasing awareness, acceptance, and understanding that is part of human diversity. Thus, persons on the autism spectrum have rights to equal access and meaningful participation in all development activities vital to their empowerment. They share the nurturing public-private alliances towards an autism okay Philippines put emphasis on the whole of society approach to development and empowerment of persons on the autism spectrum and all persons with disabilities. Thus, we are one with all government agencies, NGOs, private sector, persons with disability organizations, parents, and persons on the autism spectrum in making this observance genuinely meaningful, not only for this week, but for each day onwards. Congratulations to Autism Society Philippines for organizing this webinar on all you need to know about autism. Thank you for your steadfast support to the empowerment of persons on the autism spectrum and building the capacities of their parents and families as well. Happy 26 National Autism Consciousness Week. Mabuhay ang mga taong may autismo. Mabuhay ang Pilipino.
O, diba? Ang meaningful naman ang message ni Sir. O, ayan. Unmute natin si Teacher Cez. It's very important talaga itong ating linggo. And we have to highlight yung ano, 'di ba? Yung theme. 'Di ba, Teacher Cez?
Oh yes, at saka ngayon kasi mas ipinapaigting natin at mas kailangan talaga ang partnership natin with government and private institutions kasi kung wala yung suporta ng lahat, hindi tayo uusad, lalo na sa ganitong panahon ng pandemya. Kaya
ang hirap kaya gumalaw kapag mag-isa ka lang, lalo na ngayon na diba, like for ASP lang, kung tayo lang, it's really hard to mobilize na wala na yung iba talaga yung energy pag lahat kayo nasa isa kwarto, kapag lahat tayo nasa sa arena, 'di ba? When we're all in MOA arena, when we start the week, talagang feel namin yung energy, kaya nakaka-inspire to sustain. Ngayon na talagang we have to be responsible and stay indoors. Talagang it's very difficult. So, ganun. O, Teacher Cez, introduce mo na ang ating guest for this morning.
Pasensya na earlier, no? Especially to Dr. Tippy. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, no? napaka-honored natin, napaka-privileged natin at makakasama natin this morning si Dr. Tippy Tanchanco. She's a developmental pediatrician and the Director of for Research and Innovation at the Ateneo School of Medicine and Public Health, and she's the head of Ateneo Autism Group. So please help me welcome Dr. Tippy Tanchanco to enlighten us about autism.
O, di ba? Ano pa yan? Napakaganda pa niyan. Kaya super goddess ang arrive.
Yan yata ang gusto kong introduction. Thank you. Thank you, Mona. Thank you, sis. Maraming salamat for
Doc
having
Tippy,
me here.
What's keeping you busy?
Ngayon, research. Syempre, yun ang ginagawa ng aming Ateneo Autism Study Group. Syempre, nagtuturo. Maraming bata rin may sakit ngayon. Di ba? Lahat tayo affected by COVID. So, kahit gabi, minsan we receive calls. So, at saka syempre, aral pa rin. Tuloy-tuloy ang ating pag-aaral to find out kung ano yung mga bago at saka yung ano yung mga technology na dapat meron tayo, comparing it din kung ano yung meron sa ibang bansa. Gusto natin malaman, di ba? Para mas mapagsilbihan natin yung ating mga kababayan.
And dapat ganun din ang mga magulang, continuous ang aral.
Correct. Agree ako dyan. Sobra. Lifelong talaga dapat yung pag-aaral natin lahat.
Merong mga magulang ngayon na parang kakadiagnose lang ng anak nila. Pero as our experience tells us, kaming mga matatanda na ang mga anak, talagang for every phase of autism, parang, nag-iiba sila. Talagang the condition and the challenges from the condition also morph as they age.
Right.
Pero today, ang focus natin, Doc Tippy, is like the basics, how we can help them, di ba?
Tama. Actually, ang ganda nga kasi parang ngayon, pwede tayong tumutok. Yun yung gusto ko about itong pinagawa niyong lecture for me. It's actually a sharing. I want to view it that way. Sharing of knowledge. And then we really welcome. Halimbawa kung sa chat, pwede silang maglagay kung ano yung mga opinions nila or ano yung mga tingin nila, mga needs nila. No, maganda mag-share tayo as a community. Kasi kahit hindi tayo magkita-kita ngayon, nandito pa rin tayo as a community having one goal. So I think maganda na yun yung tutukan natin this morning. So yun yung focus natin, kumbaga.
Alright. Teacher Cecile, meron ka bang ibang mga guidance at pabaon kay Doc Tippy before we begin?
Ako, expert naman si Doc Tippy dyan, ano? Kaya I don't think she needs any guidance.
We defer to the goddess.
Ay, hindi. Siyempre, community tayo, collaborative tayo. Siyempre, gusto natin ng opinions nyo. At saka guidance, no? Siyempre, we listen to you. Parents pa rin. Ako, lagi ako nakikinig sa mga parents. Kayo pa rin yung wisest and kayo talaga yung nagli-lead dito sa mga effort na to. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to all of you. Tsaka sa lahat ng parents po, mga teachers, mga guro na nandito sa call natin ngayong umaga.
Thank you, Doc Tippy. And the floor is now yours.
Okay. Maraming salamat po. Yan. Kita niyo po ba yung screen ko?
Yes, we do.
Okay, sige. So ito po yung task sa akin ngayong umaga. Mag-share daw po ako about all you need to know about autism. Pero meron po akong rejoinder sa ilalim ang nilagay ko. And this is really not all that you need to know. Kasi marami pa po tayo talagang kailangang matutunan tungkol sa autism spectrum disorder. Let me begin by showing our objective. So, anong pag-uusapan natin ngayong umaga? So, I wanted to divide it into parang 5 items na pwede nating pag-usapan. No? So, una, why was my child diagnosed to have autism spectrum disorder? So, karamihan ng mga nandito sa call or sana nandito din would be parents of very young kids who are newly diagnosed. So, I'm sure tinatanong natin, bakit na-diagnose or paano na-diagnose yung anak ko to have ASD? Anong cause nito? Bakit siya nagkaganito? Ano yung mga maaaring physical or mental issues that may accompany it? Kasi kailangan ma-anticipate natin kung ano yung magiging need ng mga anak natin. Ano? Tapos, how do parents usually react after the diagnosis? ASD may also have some mental and behavioral comorbid conditions. A lot of them may have ADHD or symptoms of hyperactivity and inattention co-occurring with autism spectrum disorders. And there are actually some researchers, some scientists who would say that ADHD and autism spectrum may be part of one broad spectrum. So there are some scientists who say that. No? A lot of them may have social phobias. They're fearful of big events, loud events, of parties. Wala pa po tayong parties ngayon, but later on, yun yung kailangan nating bantayan, di ba? Yung face-to-face na really loud parties. It's something that we need to prepare our child for. And some of them may be experiencing separation anxiety, especially if they're toddlers or it's the first time going out. And that's why when we do resume face-to-face schooling, it's something that we will need to prepare our children for. Then let's talk about the possible causes of autism. So they say that it's actually an interplay of both genetics and environment. There are several genes and genetic mutations that have been implicated in autism. If you look at the algorithm of how autism is diagnosed abroad, it's actually routine in other countries to check for Fragile X, to check for chromosomal microarray. Yun po yung nagbe-break yung chromosome when you have microdeletions in the chromosomes, or if this child may have SNPs that may have been inherited. So that is usually part of the workup that's done abroad. No? So you look into the genetics. But we have to remember that there is no one single gene that causes autism. And that's what the research is telling us now. We look into environmental factors, and there are a lot of factors being investigated at this time. You want to see if there are viral infections that cause it. An example of that would be the Zika virus, wherein they saw that the brains of children didn't develop well. That's an example. There are now studies looking into medications, looking into toxins in the environment, looking at pollutants that the parents or the mom or the family is exposed to or even led in the house. These are things that are now being studied. I just want to state that there is no link between autism and vaccines. And a lot of parents have asked this, and it's really scary because usually at around the time when the child is diagnosed, so maybe mga 2 years old or 4 years old, this is the time when the child has just finished the series of vaccination. So it's actually very important to remember that vaccines save lives, no? So it's still very important. But what I would probably do is to ensure that your child is very healthy when you have those vaccines given to the child. So other causes, these are risk factors. So that this has been well documented in research already, no? So in terms of gender, boys are more affected than girls. So they say, some research would say there is a 4:1 ratio when it comes to this. Family history is also important to research or to look into, because there are several families wherein you will see several individuals affected, no? So it may run in families. And if one child has autism, they say that there is a higher chance that next sibling may have the condition. We also see a higher risk in extremely preterm babies. So yung sobrang premature po pag pinanganak, they're at risk of autism. And then there are other disorders that I mentioned earlier. And there's actually some research that parental age might be a risk factor as well. So I need you to remember, these are just risk factors. If you have this, it doesn't mean automatically a child will get autism. But it just says that there is a higher risk for children if they have these factors. So how do parents react to the diagnosis? And I will quote this from Dr. Stephen Shore. And there's a lot of movement towards more proactively okay, can you hear me? There. Okay. So How did they respond? We start with awareness, and that's what we've all been doing. But I think it's important that we don't stop with awareness. We need to go through the other steps as well. Part of that will be acceptance, an appreciation for the skills, the gifts of our children, and a call to action. What are the things that we can do to support our child? So let's go to intervention at this time. And this is just very briefly. We treat the biological and medical conditions because if you look at this is actually low-lying fruit. No, if there are seizures, if the child is extremely picky and we can't put in the good nutrients for the brain, if the child has sleep concerns, baliktad yung sleep-wake cycle niya, these are things that we can easily work on even at home. No, so we want to address that. We want to investigate if these comorbidities are in our children. This is the next thing that we want, and this is very important. You want to create a team. You want to create a team around your child for therapy or intervention. We cannot do this alone. Even doctors will not be able to help you by themselves. You have to create that team of specialists. You have to create that support team around you and around your child. And these will include teachers, other parents, therapists, social workers, your parish priest, your counselor. It will need to be a team. Create a team around your child for therapy and intervention. And when we talk about intervention, experts actually recommend 25 hours of structured intervention per week for preschool children 3 to 5 years old. But ito po recommendation sa States. This is a recommendation abroad. Because everything is out of pocket in our situation, magiging sobrang mahal po yan if 25 hours of intervention talaga yung parang pinaplano natin sa mga anak natin. But there is a way of going around it. What we want you to do is to really closely follow up the interventions at home and create that structure for your child. I think that is very important. And we've seen that parental involvement during the pandemic, and dami pong parents who really stepped up kasi walang face-to-face because we don't have face-to-face intervention with our therapists at this time. Everything is online. The parents have stepped up and created that environment for the children, and we've seen major improvements in these children because of the parental support that they got. Let me just go through some of the interventions that you will encounter, and I'm sure a lot of you have already gone through the web. Nag-Google na po kayo, marami na po kayong information na nakita, no? But let me just go through some interventions that you will see. And it's not necessary that your child will get all of these interventions because your doctor, your psychologist, your psychiatrist, or neurologist should be able to support you or to guide you as to what interventions your child might need at this moment. No? So these are examples of interventions. We talk about behavioral analysis. There are different types available. You have ABA, who use discrete trial training. These are other examples. Pivotal response, we might not have it here, but we do have some practitioners of Early Start Denver model or ESDM. And then an example, another intervention would be speech and language therapy. And what is this? It's the assessment and treatment of speech and communication problems. So remember that when we talk about speech and language, we talk about receptive language, what the child understands, and we talk about expressive language, what the child is able to say or what the child is able to express. When we talk about expressive language, it's not necessarily speech. There are other ways of communicating for our children, no? And we have to remember that. So when we talk about speech and language therapy, it coordinates the mechanics of speech with meaning, para yung words na iintindihan niya, yun ang goal natin, and the use of language. Language pragmatics, or how we will use the language that we have now, is actually a very important skill that our children will need to learn. For some, they might need some devices or might need some assisted communication device for them to be able to communicate. We talk about occupational therapy. So our OT our OTs will address the different occupations of the child. And ito po yung sinasabi ni Ms. Mona earlier. As the child goes through different stages of life, our children will have different occupations, or they will have different milestones in every stage. So nag-iiba po yung goals natin. Our goals for them will change. It will vary depending on what age and stage they are in. And that is what the OT will try to address. So initially, they might target appropriate play. It's important that our children become independent. They have activities of daily living that they need to fulfill. I highlighted feeding. Some of our children who are very selective eaters will need feeding therapy because we really need to get those nutrients into their system. The OTs may also address fine motor skills, visual perceptual skills, and social skills. And a lot of times in our local setting, it's also our OTs who will address sensory integration. So what do they do here? They will help the child process sensory information, including movement, touch, smell, sight, and sound, and try to help the child's brain interpret this and integrate the information that the environment gives the child. So the OTs play a lot of roles when we look into the different interventions. This is something that is not common in our setting, physical therapy for children with ASD, but I think it's very important that we address this as well. When we talk about PT, our usual picture here would be individuals who have a stroke. Usually yung mga matatanda or yung elderly yung makikita natin. But physical therapy and movement is very important for a lot of our children because some of them or a lot of them may have some degree of incoordination or yung developmental incoordination. And then, when you look at it, all our muscles, including our muscles for speech, need to be stronger for us to be able to produce the words that we need for speech. And if a child has very low tone or is very incoordinated or has difficulty swallowing because of the smooth muscles in the mouth, then we see the role of the physical therapist. The PT addresses movement to help improve muscle tone, to help improve balance and coordination. So it's also something that we need to look into. This is another type of intervention, social skills training, and you need to make sure that the child fits the group that he belongs to. So it focuses on simple skills like eye contact or how to make a friend, things that we usually take for granted. But some of our children will need scaffolding or some support in order to learn these things. And social skills training might be important for children who are a little older, not when they're super young or when they're in that early intervention stage, but when they're older, you expect them to socialize in school or have a small barkada already, then social skills training may facilitate that skill when they're a little older. We want to stress the role of education, and this is the last intervention that I'm going to mention at this time, and this is very important. We want the least restrictive environment for our children, and when we talk about the least restrictive environment, I'm not just talking about classrooms or the walls wherein our children stay. When we talk about the least restrictive environment, this refers to some principles that guide the education of the child. This is guided by the individualized education plan of the child. And when we say individualized, this is catered to the needs of each individual child. Hindi po siya generic or hindi po siya one size fits all. And that is why you will need your SPED teachers or special education teachers and your regular education teachers coordinating very closely. So that is our goal. And you will see that we try to begin with general education classes, and then we see how the child will thrive later on, and we want to see how the child will what supports the child will need. So the child who gets SPED should be ideally in the same classroom as other children, and I think that's what the DepEd Ed is now working on, which is actually very good because that environment actually teaches our child a lot of things, a lot of, we call it the non-written curriculum, and that's also equally important as the curriculum, as the curriculum that is administered by our teachers. So those are the formal therapies and interventions. Let me go to some tips. Kasi syempre, newly diagnosed, what can I do now? Wala pa akong services, wala pa akong team. So what are some examples of things? If let's say you were diagnosed last week, what can I do now? What can I look into, or what are the small things that I can probably work on? First, check out reliable resources. So the fact that you're here is very good already, because that means you have that awareness, you have that desire to learn more about the condition so you can help your child better, no? And mag-member na po kayo sa ASP. Plugging ba? Marami po silang chapters, and maganda na meron tayong support as parents, no? We can't do this alone. It's actually more fun. It's actually better. It's less stressful if we have that community supporting us, no? So look for reliable resources. Help your child communicate. So aside from speech therapy, you might want to teach them gestures, use pictures, because a lot of our children are visual learners, or they get it more if they see what we're doing, if we're using our actions. And then help other people understand your child, because you're the parent who's the primary caregiver of this child. Mas naiintindihan niyo po sila, mas kilala niyo siya. So a lot of times we want to be translators for our children so that the rest of the family, the bigger family, and we have a barangay na talagang tumutulong. Malalaki po yung families natin, diba? So we need to interpret the behavior of our children, or what our child wants to communicate, to the rest of the clan. Help them manage their senses. So we mentioned sensory processing conditions. Try to explore, are the lights in the sala too bright for my child? So pwede bang palitan ko yung light bulb into something that's more soothing and not glaring, and see if mabawasan yung tantrums niya in the sala. Or na-overwhelms you sa sounds, pwede ba siya mag-earphone? So you want to see if there's a way of supporting the sensory concerns of your child. It's very important that you make a schedule for your child. I've seen a lot of parents, so sige, bahala na kung kailan siya kakain or kung kailan siya matutulog, iba-iba. And that will make the child more wary or more dysregulated. If they have a schedule that they follow in the house, alam na nila what will happen next. It makes them less anxious. It makes things more predictable for them, no? So, and when they're used to that schedule, you will see that their behavior usually also improves. And then, give them time to process what you tell them. A lot of times, kasi nagmamadali tayo, a lot of times we're always in a hurry, we're always rushing them. If we ask a question, we demand an immediate response. But what if we try to slow down a bit? What if we ask them the question again? What if we help them co-regulate? Nakita niyo po yung difference? Kanina parang di ba medyo mas mabilis ako nagsasalita, pero minsan po kailangan talaga mas mabagal tayo, mas patient tayo sa ating mga anak, because we are co-regulators of our children. Kung tayo agit, kung tayo kinakabahan, pati sila magiging agit, pati sila kakabahan. If we're agitated, if we're anxious, our children will sense that, and we're not helping them co-regulate. And lastly, and I think this is very important, you need to take care of yourself as the carer of your child. So the first thing that we have to remember is we have to acknowledge the emotional impact of autism. For a lot of parents, and I've heard them saying this, it's like their dreams for their children have really changed. And we have to acknowledge that emotion, no? And I think it's important that we acknowledge that and look for a friend, a trusted person, your husband, your partner, and communicate that openly, and so that can be processed. You can process it together as partners or with your pastor. No? Get support. Talk to a friend. Join ASP. Know how to ask help. So hindi, kahit na parang Wonder Woman po tayong lahat minsan, it's important that you have that team behind you as well. So dapat parang Marvel heroes kayo, hindi ka Lone Ranger. We want you to educate yourself. And that's what we're doing now. And there are a lot of resources that are available to us. And lastly, self-care is very important. We need you to take care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally. Kasi kung halimbawa, sobrang wala na kayong, pagod na pagod kayo, may sakit kayo, you're sick, you're emotionally drained, how can you support your child if that's the case? So don't feel guilty when you need time to take care of yourself, because when you take care of yourself, that also means that you're taking care of your child, or you will have more to give your child because you're rejuvenized and you have that energy to conquer the world afterwards. So I will end with that. Just a recap of what we talked about. We talked about why my child was diagnosed to have ASD, what caused it, some physical and mental issues that accompany it, how parents react, and how autism is usually treated. So to end, let me share this reading I found from the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. And this is written by adults with autism. No? This is what they said. So it gives us a glimpse of their hindsight or their reflections, because they themselves have autism. They say being autistic is part of what makes your child who they are. Autism doesn't mean that your child will have a worse life than other children. Their life may be different than what you had expected, but your child can still have a great life. Part of building that great life for your child is learning how to support them as persons with autism. So remember that the diagnosis changes nothing about who they are. They are the same kid. They are your kid. And this kid is the same kid that you have always known and loved. And they are exactly who they are meant to be. So with this, I will end my sharing and have a great day po. Maraming salamat. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tippy. Your presentation was quite clear, and so many of our self-advocates who are present agreed with many of the points that you raised. We are now opening our floor to questions. Please put in your questions through the chat. You can also raise your hand. May I also introduce one of our resource speakers this morning. He's the president of our self-advocate circle at Autism Society Philippines. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning.
Yes. Dr. P, I think there are questions regarding interventions. There are many supplements that are being sold in the internet or being floated around, including vitamins, megavitamins. Can you enlighten us on how we can be discerning about what would fit our children?
Okay. Actually, marami nga po dyan. Ano? And I think we have to remember that all our interventions need to be individualized. So I've seen in the chat a question about vitamin D.
Yes.
There are some studies saying that, and I've seen this in a lot of my patients, when I check the vitamin D level of Filipinos, and it's ironic, we're in a tropical country, but our vitamin D levels are low. So if that's the case, what I usually do is supplement them with vitamin D. So my take on this is that you have to be guided by your doctors if you will need supplementation. That's one. I need you to be discerning, because a lot of times marketers can take advantage of parents and families with autism, because a lot of parents will try to grab onto anything that they can do because of their desire to help their child. It will be good to speak to our elders in ASP who have the wisdom and experience of what has worked for them before. But ako yan, review the science, go for evidence-based materials. There are good resources. Ask your health provider to guide you on as to what supplements or what medicines or what protocols will need to be given to your child. But then you have to individualize it and you have to monitor it. So hindi pwedeng bigay ka lang ng bigay ng supplements na hindi mo minomonitor ano yung effect. to your child. So it's important to also monitor what these supplements are doing.
Okay, so again, we stress that self-medication is not really that advisable, and that I think there's also a need for establishing baselines before supplements and medication can be given. Okay, so there are also questions about non-pharmacotherapy, pharmacological interventions such as social skills training. I think we do have comments from self-advocates. One of them is saying that social skills training is needed not just for them, but also for a typical individual.
I agree, Wesley. That's a really good point. I saw Wesley's comment. Wesley's from Singapore, and I
Yes.
saw the comment. I agree with you completely. Yes.
I actually have a question for Ian, if you don't mind, Dr. Tippy, no?
Yes. please.
Having gone through early intervention, what do you think your parents could have done better? What do you think you wish you had, but maybe did not have it early enough or did not have enough of it? What do you think, Ian?
Can't really judge at this point since there are some aspects of early intervention that I've forgotten or chose to forget. But they were able to they were able to provide timely intervention in many cases, and I'm appreciative of that.
Thank you, Ian. So you got occupational therapy, speech therapy?
Yes, as far as I can remember. But I may have forgotten one or two, or may have not taken some, but I cannot really recall at this time.
Dr. Tippy, I actually have a what would you say? There's a I guess something going on social media about applied behavioral analysis. A lot of those who practice, and these are their clients talking about it, saying that they had a bad experience with ABA. So it's very difficult to generalize all of the professionals, right? But for a few, ABA was not, and these are adults articulating, no, that it was not helpful for them because they were being forced to do things that technically is part of their coping mechanism. What is your take on that?
Well, first I would look into the training of our ABA, because there are some professionals who would claim that they are behavioral therapists after attending one seminar. So you'd probably want to look into the credentials of your practitioner. And I think it's important for parents, it's a right of parents to know the training before they engage their professionals. So that's important. There are lots and different kinds of behavioral ABA, and I've written down some examples. But what as a professional, and this is my opinion, what I would look for would be interventions that are really relationship-based. Because sometimes if it's really just teaching the child a lot of drills or very repetitive commands that you expect them to follow, then it doesn't stay longer term, or the generalization becomes difficult later on because they only learn one skill, versus something that will entice them to engage because they know that this is a trusted individual, a trusted parent who knows me and knows how to react to me. I think that's more important, no? But we cannot generalize. There are really, really good therapists there, and I've worked with them, and they were talagang wow, sobra. And I've seen a lot of children develop and really blossom under their care, no? But yun nga, it has to be individualized. The experience of one family might be different from another. What we might be hearing from social media are the more vocal ones. So we really need to sift through the information that we hear.
Thank you, Doc Tippy.
There are also some questions regarding specific behavioral problems. And as you mentioned, everything needs to be individualized. Are there guiding principles in determining how they can manage behaviors which are atypical or challenging?
Sige. So the question is, how do they determine the atypical behaviors? Is that the question?
Doc Tippy, they were talking about fears, like of wind, and then there was one obsession to gadgets. So these are in their assessment atypical.
Okay. It actually depends. And it's hard to generalize at this time, no? Kasi I haven't really seen the child. And that I think that's the value of going for an assessment, either with the doctor or with the psychologist. I think that's the value of having that assessment, or having that assessment with your therapist. So what usually happens is, in the beginning, the therapist will have an evaluation before they craft a program for the child. And when they craft that program, it actually has to include the goals that the parents want for the child in the next 6 months. So it's not just something that's imposed on you. It's something that the therapist should be working closely with you on. So kayo yung magde-determine kung ano yung goals, ano yung important for your family when you come up with this plan for the child. When we talk about behaviors, we look at the milestones and what is usually typically expected for a particular age and stage of the child, and we base it on that. So what the therapist will do, will try to make goals that are aligned with what is expected for that particular age. So they have some techniques. So halimbawa, yung example, yung mga sounds. So particularly siguro sensitivities to sound. So examples would be, they'll give you some techniques that you can try, putting on headphones, singing in the rain, or for some, it's really mild exposure. If the child is scared of the rain, going out in the rain and taking a bath in the rain, for some kids that will work. So it really depends. And sometimes it's a lot of trial and error. And you knowing your child, because you don't want to force your child into doing something that really doesn't want to do at this time. Baka kailangan dahan-dahan, konti-konti yung gagawin natin.
Dr. Tippy, there was a question about how effective online therapies are. And I'd like to follow that up actually with a question for Ian, because Ian actually works and his work is virtual. So my question for Dr. Tippy is how effective virtual therapy is, and for Ian, how have you coped with the challenges of having a virtual job versus working face-to-face? Dr. Tippy muna.
Yeah, me first. We have now 2 years of experience of virtual therapy. And well, we don't have research that will tell, because the pandemic has just happened and it's really short-term research. But so this is anecdotal from what I've been seeing with patients who've been following up with me during the pandemic. Online intervention has worked significantly for a lot of them. Like, let's say speech therapy, most of our speech therapists are now online, and the children continue to develop. That's what I have seen during this time. No? However, there are some instances when it might be difficult for them to engage in purely online intervention. And usually I've been seeing this in children who have concurrent ADHD, or who behaviorally the parents have not learned how to manage the behavior enough for the child to interact with the person across the screen. So it's really a case-to-case basis. But what I usually tell my parents is try it out first, because if you haven't tried it out, then there is no way for you to know whether this will work for your child or not. And a lot of times, having a little is better than having nothing. Diba? And so that's one. And another thing is, I have seen parents who are really excellent, who are really awesome about supporting their children. Na I see them, let's say, 4 months ago, or I see them 6 months ago, and then they follow up with me. And the next time I talk to them, it's like they're therapists or they're like teachers. They're asking the right questions. They know what maneuvers will work for their children. And I think that's a blessing that we've had during this pandemic, because parents are now more hands-on compared to pre-pandemic, wherein they just drop off their children in therapy centers. Parents really know their children now, and I guess that's a blessing.
True. We've seen this also in our home empowerment program, that now that parents have a bigger role in intervention for their kids. There is more consistency at home. They understand the intervention better, and they're able to apply it more consistently, rather than if they were just to leave everything to the therapists.
It's a happy result of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Ian, what about you?
Yeah.
How is your online life?
To be honest, I'm satisfied with my online work because I still remain to be productive despite the external events beyond our control. However, some of us would rather work in an office setting, even with the risks attached to in the current state. And I can concur with technology making a lot of things easier and more convenient, like online therapies, and it also enables parents to do more for their children compared to before, where they are not as active and they are asked to the recommendations, but the recommendations are done by other people in their household because of time constraints. So I really appreciate the online stuff. Some of us would still prefer the person-to-person interaction. Thank you for that.
True. Thank you, Ian. And Doc Tippy, a lot of people are asking also about mental health supports. I think we sometimes as a nation actually ignore that. And for the adults on the autism spectrum, I know that ASP SASI have peer support groups. So they come together, not necessarily coming in with a professional, but being there for each other helps. What about the young kids? And I'm talking maybe tweeners or older children. What are our options for helping them cope, with the challenges of the pandemic? Maybe they have anxieties over something else. How can we help them?
Right. And I think that's a very real concern, because it has already been documented that individuals with autism are at higher risk of having anxiety and depression. The difficult part for some is that there are some individuals who are nonverbal and who will not be able to tell us that they are sad or that they are scared. And sometimes anxiety will manifest as aggression. Takot sila, pero hindi natin nakikita yung takot nila. What we see is anger or aggression. So sometimes that happens as well. So this will need sensitive parents to be able to pick that up based on the reactions of their children. Sometimes it will need professional help for us to be able to diagnose that this child is indeed suffering from anxiety or has extreme sadness and depression. So that's also what I would probably teach our children at this time would be some techniques of mindfulness, especially for our older kids or some of our more verbal children with autism. We can teach them that, taking in that breath, helping them regulate. And it's the role of parents to help our children co-regulate, because very young kids are not able to do this themselves. So they rely on parents. They look at how parents react to certain situations. They will look at how you will act to certain individuals, and they will imitate that. So if they see that you are just calm, even if they're having a meltdown, and you try to treat them with respect, and you try to give them the space that they need instead of scaring them or hitting them or shouting at them, and giving them maybe a corner where they can calm down, where they are safe. For a lot of them, it actually helps. No? So when our children are younger, you look into behaviors to see if they are indeed anxious or if they are depressed or sad. So those are some of the red flags that we look into. Sometimes we look into changes into behaviors, eating, sleeping habits. Those are some signs that we can also look for.
There
And
are also
actually, what teacher says, it's not just also the kids. The parents are also very stressed in these times.
true.
What
Yes.
share our options. Teacher says, what does ASP do for the parents who need to put their hair down and talk about their condition?
Well, we do have our monthly family support group meetings. This is a free for all, and the parents just share experiences, share their concerns, their problems. They get insights from other parents who are going through the same journey as they. So when they feel that they're not alone, and they also get energies from other parents, it really helps. So I encourage parents who have not yet participated in family support group meetings, please feel free to do so. It's a great help for those who need to blow steam, to even share problems. When people are able to express it, again, there's already a lightening of the load.
Yeah, and I think, to be in full transparency, the adults, like Ian's team, already has like a peer support group going on, but there is a gap in our programs where we talk to the teenagers, and sometimes the teenagers are those who are really the ones who are still starting out on their journey to adulthood and may have specialized needs. So siguro that's also something that we can have a conversation on. Actually, madami pa pong kailangang ayusin for our kids, and to have like sex education. Maybe that's something that some of you may have to attend to later on in life. Some of you are already having to deal with this challenge, diba? So it's different for each of us. Timing is different for each of us, but at the end of the day, we all know that we have such a vibrant community helping us out. Like the Ateneo Autism Study Group has been very helpful to our cause, this forum included, as well as information, science, research-based information na mapakikinabangan natin. Doc Tippy, talk about the Ateneo Autism Study Group. What's in the pipeline for you?
We're closing up our Fragile X study. So this was funded by Pediatrician. So we now have trained several individuals, actually scientists, to do the Fragile X testing for us. So that's one. We're actually in the process of submitting several grants, looking into the microbiome of some of our individuals with ASD. So we want to look into that. Vitamin D is actually an area of interest then as well. So it's something that one of our doctors are interested in, and tignan po natin in the near future. No? So I think the nice thing here is we're actually collaborating with several individuals and institutions as well. And I think that's the way to do research. And our goal is to be able to apply what we learn in our community, no? So that it's not just left with people doing bench work, but we also want to see the applications and how we can improve the lives of families and individuals.
That's so relevant at this point. And I'd also like to mention, Teacher says, we have our friends from SM Markets in the room today. For those of you who don't know, SM Markets is one of the autism inclusive employers that we have. They have hired all over the country from Baguio all the way to Cagayan de Oro. Meron pong mga SM Markets who are working with individuals on the autism spectrum. Most significantly, I can see their AVP for operations, Miss Cherry Concepcion. Hello, Miss Cherry. Good morning. Maganda ka pa din.
Hi,
So-
good morning, Miss Mona. Good morning,
Hello.
everyone.
Hello po. So we actually have we have a big group today. We had 251 participants so far. And I think I know that Doc Tippy has another engagement that she has to attend. So siguro we should be wrapping up with the final questions. Habol na po kayo kung meron pa kayong mga additional questions.
Actually, there are questions that have to deal with genetics. Can you please, Dr. P, can you clarify how genes play a role in the transmission or acquisition of ASD?
Okay. So right now po, wala pa pong isang gene. So we don't have a single gene that can account for the symptoms of autism, no? And what scientists are finding out is there are multiple genes that may be involved. Now, this is how I look at it, and this is how a lot of scientists will also look at it. We are born with our genes, but it doesn't mean that all our genes are expressed. Okay, so and that is the wonder of the thing of what we call epigenetics. Kasi genetics is us being born with our genes. It can run in families, but through epigenetics, we are able to change the expression of our genes. So pwede nating palitan kung paano na-express yung genes na napanganak yung anak natin, na napanganak ng anak natin or namana ng anak natin sa from generations, no? And one way of doing that will be modifying the environment. That's why we want to go for early intervention. That's how we modify the brain or how we teach our children skills. And changing the food, looking at the food. So ito, very basic. Kumakain ba ng chichirya yung mga anak niyo? Kumakain ba yan ng chips? Umiinom ba siya ng soft drinks? Kumakain ba siya ng highly colored food? Tanggalin natin yon because this will cause inflammation that can affect our children. So very simple things that we can do to modify the genes that our children were born with.
Malaking usapan nga yung epigenetics.
Sobra, Teacher Sis. Malaking usapan siya. 10 araw mahigit pa.
Correct. Actually, si Teacher Says wanted to have a session on just that. Na we needed to have a kind of a build up to that kasi medyo technical, Doc, no?
Right,
Baka ma-overwhelm sila mommy and daddy. So,
right, lalo na kung young parents na newly diagnosed, parang
correct.
yan.
Kailangan po muna nila ng konting dapat napalaban po muna kayo sa mga ibang topics before we get to epigenetics.
True.
There's a lot of sex related concerns here like masturbation, arousal. Ano ba Doc Tippy ang pwede nating ma-advise for both, not just the parents but also the person on the spectrum?
Okay. Mahabang usapan to. Hindi ako abot ng 10 o'clock. But siguro in a nutshell.
Last question na. Last question. Big bang pa.
Sige, siguro po in a nutshell. Halimbawa, mga toddlers and very young kids, you will see that yung intention nila is to explore themselves. And it's a way of learning about their body and how it works. But in the process kasi, they see that it's pleasurable. And that is why they keep on repeating, touching themselves. O yun yung tinatawag natin na masturbation. Now, for very young kids, kailangan po natin tingnan. We need to see because a lot of times they will do this if they are bored or if they don't have any task at hand or parang downtime nila. So that's when you will notice. So for some, they will they will tell the parents to keep their children busy or to keep them preoccupied so that they will not engage in masturbation or touching themselves. In older individuals, they say even neurotypical people do this. Diba? And there's nothing wrong with it. That's what they say. However, there are rules that we need to follow. You will need to do it in the privacy of your room, not in the sala, not where anyone is, you can be seen by anyone. You can't go running around naked in the house because you need to differentiate what is public and private. And your OTs or your behavioral therapist can actually assist you with that, no? So there are rules. And then, syempre, hygienic. You wash your hands. You don't go around na parang talking about it kasi to other people because we have to follow nga certain rules of privacy. So I think that's important then. And I think part of this then is yung sex education na sinasabi natin na I think for older individuals, it would be good if we can have, let's say, modules on that and have our specialists share their knowledge to us.
Thank you, Doc. Can we also have Ian's perspective on this matter?
Well, from what I can say is that not everyone is interested in things like sex and all of that.
Right.
And there are places where you can talk about it. You can just talk about that in public, maybe in very, very close circle of friends. It also applies with dating and relationship. Not everyone has the choice to reveal who one is dating or who one is in a relationship with. Those things are very private, and it is up to the person who has that to bring them up or not. And you have to again make sure that the place where you're bringing it up is appropriate. You can just bring it up in corporate meetings and all that. You can just send a DM if you want. And also, I got a message from Adrian Madriaga, and it has something to do with anxiety, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Paul? He said that given the challenges that he has been throughout his adult life, plus anxiety and depression that he has been going on, is there any hope for reintegration and inclusion after the pandemic?
Yeah. I think that's again that's a longer conversation, and it is important for us and your group as peers to actually have conversations and bounce ideas off. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of the new president of SM Save More, Ms. Bang Manalad, who is also in the room. Thank you po, Ms. Bang, for gracing us with your presence. And we know that there is a longer, bigger conversation on autism that needs to be had. This is only the beginning. Please watch ASP for further events and further conversations during the week. In fact, tomorrow we're going to have a conversation on interventions together with Dr. Alexis Reyes naman. We were also having a conversation on employment later, and from an advocacy angle, the ASEAN Master Plan for Persons with Disabilities. Napakarami pong activities that we are going to have today. Before we end the conversation, let's have a photo up. Can we ask Celine from our team to...
Yes, be ready na. Please open your
alright.
camera. Please open your camera. Okay, we have 11 na screen ang gagawin natin. Yan. Okay, first screen muna tayo. Okay. Let's smile. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, next group.
Please open your cameras.
Please open your camera in 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, next
I'm
group.
sorry, but I can't open my cam. I'm not properly dressed.
It's okay.
Okay.
Okay, please open your camera. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, next group. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, next group. 3, 2, 1, smile. Next group uli. Please open your camera, please. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, next. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, next. 3, 2, 1, smile. Next. Smile. Next group. 3, 2, 1, smile. Next. 3, 2, 1, smile. Last group. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Which group was I?
Thank you, Sosini.
Thank you.
Is it
Thank
is
you,
it
Doc Tippy.
So, to close,
Thank you. Thank you po.
Thumbs up for all of you.
very glad that I was able to attend this meeting, and I'm very glad to
oh
be able to
yes.
see a lot of faces.
Yes, to
especially
close,
from
we would like to thank Dr. Tippy Tanchanco and Ian Lopez for gracing our webinar this morning. And thank you so much for the information that you have imparted to us, Dr. Tippy. Sana hindi kayo magsawa sa amin. And
Thank
as
you
Ma'am
po for the opportunity. Thank you, Mona, Teacher Ces. Salamat po. Sa inyong lahat, maraming salamat.
At as Mona has mentioned earlier, we have activities every day in commemoration of National Autism Consciousness Week. So we hope to see you in the succeeding days in our coming events. So with that, thank you and have a happy week.